There is a sound no Valyrian dragon keeper was ever trained for. The sound of a dragon begging. It came from above a fortress built by dragonlords who believed they'd escaped the worst fate in history. They hadn't fled the Doom. They fled decades before it, not from fire, but from Valyria itself. And the thing that found them in the dark wasn't in any record, any bestiary, any scroll the Freehold had ever produced. By the end of this video, you'll understand why one Dragonlord family stole their dragons and vanished into the Shadowlands beyond Asshai, and why every single one of them would have traded their fate for a quick death in the Doom of Valyria. I'm your maester at the Black Dread, and what you're about to hear is the darkest chapter in the Valyrian Bible, at least the darkest we've discovered so far. House Railix was the Freehold's dirty secret. When a rival family needed to be silenced, their signal fires snuffed out, their messages lost, their people waking up terrified and compliant, the 40 families didn't send soldiers or diplomats. They called the Night-Smotherers. The Rhaelyx bred their dragons for precision instead of spectacle. Cinder Shriekers, Embermaw and Sky Shrieker hybrids, with flame tuned for controlled heat and smoke, heavy enough to choke a rooftop without igniting a city. Their riders flew low, struck fast, and vanished into fog. In Valyria, they were feared, tolerated, and quietly despised. But here's the part no one expected. The Rhaelyx despised Valyria right back. Their lord, Valyroth, called the Quiet Crown, believed the Freehold's shared power was nothing more than a gilded cage, 40 families vetoing each other into paralysis. He didn't want a seat at the table. He wanted a throne no one could outvote. So decades before the Doom, decades before Daenerys Targaryen ever dreamed of fire, Valyroth made his move. He stole eggs from the Oros registries, burned the ledgers, silenced witnesses, took 2 adult dragons, several eggs, his family, and his riders, and flew east. He called it the Severing. The Freehold let him go, because honestly, nobody missed the Night-Smotherers. But if disappearing was the easy part, what was waiting for them on the other end? The Rhaelyx arrived near Asshai by the Shadow, a city of black stone that drinks the light, where no children are born and even the brightest days are gray. Beyond it lie the Shadowlands, where demons and dragons dwell in cliff caves, ghost grass covers the earth, and the corpse city of Stygai sits at the heart of a darkness that even Shadowbinders fear. Valyroth built a fused stone holdfast on black rock and named it Night Court. For a fragile moment it worked. They had dragons. They had fire in a land of eternal shadow. They believed they were the apex predator. Within 2 years, the records, fragments recovered from Asshai's bazaars, describe horrors without names, pack things that moved without sound, river maws beneath black water, winged predators that circled beyond torchlight, patient, watching until they struck. But none of that prepared them for what came next. A wild shadow dragon. No breed classification, no measurements. The only description says it was larger than any Valyrian-bred beast they had ever seen. They called it the Hanging Shape because it didn't fly like a dragon. It hung in the black sky, motionless, like something suspended from a ceiling that wasn't there. When Valyroth forced his mount Rhaelyx, the infamous Night-Smother, a 320-foot cinder shrieker, battle-tested across old Valyria's most dangerous operations, to ascend and confront it, Rhaelyx came back bleeding and afraid. A Valyrian war dragon, bred for centuries, bonded through blood magic, and it returned shaking. Rhaelyx never flew the same again. The Rhaelyx tried to fight the Valyrian way, burn and clear, but fire behaved wrong here, burning shorter, smoking heavier, as if the darkness drank the heat, and somewhere above Night Court, always beyond torchlight, the Hanging Shape circled. If Valyrian fire didn't work, and Valyrian dragons were no longer the most dangerous thing in the sky, what was left? It happened on a night when the torches burned low, flames leaning inward, as if trying to hide from something outside the walls. Nixa, the youngest cinder shrieker in the Rhaelyx stable, called Candle Thief for the way her smoke curled, soft and quiet, almost gentle, was chained in the outer eyrie, barely grown, 120 feet of wingspan, still young enough to chirp when her handlers brought meat, still young enough to trust the dark. The first sound was a scrape, stone on stone, somewhere above the airie's open roof. The handlers looked up and saw nothing, just the starless sky of the Shadowlands, heavy, pressing down like a ceiling. Then Nixa's chains went taut, not like she was pulling against them, like something was pulling her, pillar, upward. The iron links screamed against the stone anchors, and for one horrifying moment, the handlers saw her silhouette. Wings flared, claws raking the rock, rising off the platform as if gravity had simply changed its mind about her. Then she cried out, not a roar, not a war scream, a sound no Valyrian dragon keeper had ever been trained for. High, desperate, almost human in its terror. It echoed off the walls of Night Court and rolled out into the Shadowlands. And for 3 long seconds, every person in that holdfast stood frozen, because they had never heard a dragon beg before. She called out again, shorter, thinner, as if the darkness was swallowing the sound before it could reach them. Riders scrambled for their mounts. Vyroth himself reached the wall with a torch held high, scanning the sky for any shape, any shadow, any sign. Nothing. The chains hung loose from the platform, still swinging, the iron warm to the touch. No blood, no scales, no tracks. Nixa was gone, lifted out of a Valyrian-built fortress like a lamb from an open field. They searched for 3 days, found nothing. But on the 3rd night, a handler swore he heard something drifting down from high above Night Court, faint, broken, barely there. A chirp, the same soft sound Nixa made when she was waiting to be fed. It came once, and then the silence sealed shut over it like black water closing over a stone. They never heard it again. After Nixa, the Rhaelyx stopped pretending they were conquerors. They were prey. You might think the Shadowlands simply killed them. That would almost be a mercy. But what happened was slower, more surgical, as if the darkness wasn't attacking Night Court, just digesting it. Lady Seren, the Soot Sister, keeper of their bonding rites, died during a failed ritual meant to seal hatchlings against fear. After her death, eggs chilled and rotted from within. The surviving dragons hatched wrong, obedient but hollow, following commands with unnatural stillness. Riders stopped laughing. Smoke clung to the corridors even when no flame was lit. Then shadow tribes came, not raiders. Disciplined groups that used darkness as doctrine. They didn't charge the walls. They starved Night Court, cut patrols, struck the hatchery. Mailer, the Lamp Eater, their best combat commander, died on an inland push. Rhaela, the last clutch mother, vanished with the final viable eggs. No tracks, no trail, only silence. The heir, Varys, was killed when the outer defenses were breached. The final record of House Railix is a cracked tablet that surfaced years later in the markets of Asshai. One line, carved in High Valyrian. We came seeking a throne, we found a hunger. The Rhaelyx didn't fail because they were weak. They failed because they carried the one delusion every Valyrian dragonlord shared, that fire made them untouchable. In Valyria, that was true. In the Shadowlands, fire was just a sound that told the darkness exactly where to find you. The Targaryens fled west and built a dynasty. The Rhaelyx fled east and found something that hasn't been named. If any Rhaelyx blood remains, it isn't ruling, it's hiding, or it belongs to something older now, something that taught a Valyrian war dragon to shake, that plucked a chained cinder shrieker off a fortress wall, like pulling a candle from a sconce. And somewhere past the ghost grass, past the black water, past the corpse city of Stygai, the hanging shape is still circling. And Nixa never came home.